Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts digital event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the program, and we will only be accepting questions and comments via the chat window. At the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device, you should be able to see an option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Thank you, and enjoy the event. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU. And we are so happy to have you here at our Creative Process Series event, conversation with Annie Lanzilotto, moderated by Dr. Edvige Giunta and Donia Ayoub. So I'm going to start out and give you a little background on our presenters today. Dr. Edvige Giunta is an award-winning educator, as well as well-loved and acclaimed writer and editor. She has written extensively on Italian-American women's literature, and her articles, memoir, and poetry have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. Among others, Dr. Giunta's books include Teaching Italian-American Literature, Film, and Popular Culture, and Personal Effects, essays on memoir, teaching, and culture in the work of Louise de Salva. She was awarded the OSEA Book Club Selection for Italian-American Writers on New Jersey and the Educator of the Year Award for the Higher Education category from the Association of Italian-American Educators, among many others. Annie Rachele Lanzillotto is an author, poet, performance artist, actor, director, songwriter, and strong activist who has promoted audience participation in hundreds of performances everywhere from the Author Avenue retail market to the Guggenheim Museum. While sheltering in place alone, she has embarked on a solo Decameron to tell 100 original stories in her podcast, Annie's Story Cave. Her books include Hard Candy, Caregiving, Mourning, and Stage Light, Pitch, Roll, Yaw, L is for Lion, an Italian Bronx book Freedom Memoir, which is a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award, and Schist Song. She was on the founding board of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. And our other panelist today is Donia Ayoub, who graduated from NJCU in May 2019, obtaining her BA in English with a concentration in creative writing. She is a writing tutor at the Hub and a member of the English Department's Student Events and Publication Committee. She recently completed a 4-week intensive course on publishing at Columbia University, and she is now interning at Pen and Brush as an editorial assistant. So we are in good hands today, and I'm going to toss this over to Eddie.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's always a pleasure to participate in these conversations with writers and filmmakers. So thank you so much to the NJCU Center for the Arts for this wonderful collaboration that has allowed us to have a forum for these conversations. And thank you also to my students and graduates from New Jersey City University who work with me on the English Department Student Events and Publications Committees. Thanks to them, their ideas, their hunger for events that we come up with these events and which we ask generous writers and artists to come and share their work and their process with us. It's a great pleasure to have Annie Lanzillotto here with us. And I'm kind of grateful I don't have to give a biographical information about Annie, because I really wouldn't know where to start. Annie has been in my life and in my work, and I can really kind of separate the two for over 20 years. And once I was drawn into her circle, I never wanted to leave again. And I know this is an experience that many people who have met, or if not everyone who has met Annie, there is a kind of generosity in her work that is really unique and irresistible. So I feel very grateful that all of you are with us today, and especially my students, the students from my Triangle Fire classes, as well as students from my creative writing classes, can join us today. So Annie, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. The way the event is going to go, Annie is going to share some excerpts from her work, and I will ask her some questions. Please, as you have questions for Annie, write them on chat, and then in the second part of the hour, Donia, my wonderful co-host, will read as many of the questions as possible, and I'm sure that Annie is ready to give you wonderful answers. So Annie, welcome, and I think the first thing that we need from you is to hear your voice and to hear you read from your work. What do you have for us today?
Hey, Eddie. Okay. Well, you know, I love you, and thanks to the whole NJCU team for years for bringing us together and being important in my life. Well, the first thing I got to do is feed the meter. Anybody got a quarter out there? I need a quarter. Donia, this one don't work. This one's from Italy. Donia, you got a quarter for me?
Yeah, here's your quarter, Annie.
All right, thanks. Thanks a lot. I always need a friend to help me feed the meter, because we can't take any hour in life for granted. So we always got to pray to the goddess of time. And that's why in the first prayer I learned, the Hail Mary, there is the word hour, the hour of our death. So the word hour is always one of the most important words to me, my whole life. All right, Eddie. Eddie told me to begin with family excavation. So I'm going to start on page 1 of Ella's for Lion. And it starts with my father and me. This is called Eat with Guys You Trust. The Bronx, 1968. War is full of smoke. Lanzie's laugh is a single gruff exhale. Ha! Cigarette smoke gushes out his nostrils and up into the light over the table on the wagon wheel chandelier. His eyebrows are thick and black and move up and down, one at a time, fast like pinball flippers. His left eyebrow is interrupted by a hanging ball of skin. I shiver with laughter. I'm 5 years old, and I duck under the thick stream of smoke. He says to me, "You call this smoke, Daddy? You don't even know what smoke is." My father calls me Daddy. He belongs to me. He lays the cigarette down on his plate. The smoke rises in one white rope that curls around the chandelier of the wagon wheel and spreads out across the tin ceiling, patterned like 10,000 pizzelle. We sit together most nights, just me and him at the maple table. My brothers and sister are old enough to be out. My sister works at Macy's. My brothers run the streets. My father says with boys, you don't need to know where they are all the time. I want to be a boy. I put my feet up on the table. I eat with my hands. I get my clothes filthy, lean back on the hind legs of the chair. The women do the dishes. I don't want to do the dishes. I sit with the men at the table. I feel like a boy most of the time, but I'm not free like real boys. I can't take my shirt off in the street. I feel most free when I'm alone with my father. He takes time to teach me things. He draws a circle around the name of a racehorse, and he underlines the jockey's name. He draws an arrow at the name of the horse, and he writes in the margin, sloppy at the start. His pencil is the size of a cigarette butt, and he sharpens it with a steak knife. The wood and lead shavings mix with his cigarette ashes. I cough. I can't even breathe. So he spanks the curls of smoke that hang between us. Me and him study the names of horses and jockeys. He points to a column of numbers, and he shows me how many races each thoroughbred has run in sloppy track dirt. Other columns list how much money the thoroughbred won. The purse, how many wins the jockey has. What's the horse's lifetime purse? My father tests me on all the answers. On my father's knee, I learned the words furlong, flank, platoon, kamikaze. Cigarettes are staples, he tells me. The military issues cigarettes in K rations. 2 Chesterfields, a slab of cheese, a couple of crackers. That's all the body needs, as long as you eat with guys you trust. All right, that's page 1. I picked another couple of pages that involve my father and me. Page 151. And some of you students at NJCU might relate to some of this, because it's my father while I'm a college student, and the juxtaposition of those conversations. This is called Overheating. Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island, 1981. And my father's name, just so you know, is Joseph, Giuseppe Rocco. My middle name's Rachele, for my grandmother. And my Uncle Frank, his birth name in this story is Francesco, but I call him Frank. And my father, Frank, calls Joe, so very Bronx. But their birth names are Giuseppe Rocco and Francesco. That's their birth certificate. So my father and Uncle Frank picked me up at the end of the school year from Brown in Uncle Frank's white pickup truck. We sit 3 across on the bench seat. We have to keep the heat on the whole way down, the whole bumpy ride down, so the truck doesn't overheat. My father says, I'm in a battle with my phlegm. He keeps a little notebook in his breast pocket where he writes down a log of his daily ailments. Phlegm, what he ate, bowel movements. I'm sitting in between them and I'm coughing because the heat's hitting me in the face. Uncle Frank says, listen, kid, talking to me, spend a couple of weeks with me and I'll clear your lungs right up. I want to talk to them about what I'm studying in school. I'm all excited. So I say, Unc, Pop, I want to tell you about this guy I'm studying. His name is Soren Kierkegaard. Huh? Kierkegaard. Kierke who? What kind of name is that? He's a Dane, Unc. A what? A Dane. What, a Great Dane? You know, Daddy, my father says to me, the Dutch built New York. That's why we got stoops. Not Dutch, Pop, he's from Denmark. Just listen to me, let me tell you, he's got a lot of cool things to say. Listen to this. Kierkegaard says, it is true that a mirror has the quality of enabling a man to see his image in it. But for this, he must stand still. If he rushes hastily by it, he sees nothing. That ain't true, my Uncle Frank says. If you walk by a mirror, you see a blur. Well, Great point, Unc, but that's not what he's talking about. This is what they're teaching you in school, Daddy? How much is this costing? Forget about it. Wait a while. Give her a chance. Go ahead. Rosemary, Annie, you explain it. Go ahead. We'll listen. Well, I was just going to say that Kierkegaard says that most people rush headlong through life without stopping to think about things. And you got to stop sometimes. Stop. Forget about it. You can't stop. How can you stop? Joey, do you ever stop? You stop, you get killed. You stop, you get a whack. You know what my sergeant once said to me? You stop, forget about it. You're done. É finu. Do you know what I mean? Capiche? Capiche? Daddy, remember, he says to me, you could get knocked down your whole life as long as you don't get knocked out. Remember that. Wait a while, Uncle Frank says. You ever hear, ours is not to question why. Ours is just to do and die. But I like to question why. That's what we do in school. We question why. Huh? You ever hear that? I got 8 kids. I never stopped, not once. You know what I wish for you, my uncle says? That you should live a life as good as I. So I say to both of them, you two should sit in class with me. You got all the answers, that's for sure. If you walk by a mirror, you see a blur. I rest my case. A blur. You're right, Unc. I got to go back and tell my professor. There goes a semester's worth of existentialism out the hot window of the truck. My father goes on a little monologue. Look at this. We're passing New London, Connecticut. That's where the sub base is, Daddy. When I was in the Marines, we stayed in New London. You should stay up here. It's good country. I walked every inch of this ground. My first guard duty post out of boot camp was up here. 4 of us came up here from Paris Island. Haywood Preston, Alex Straub, Al Kopenig, and me. We had to keep our eye out for German saboteurs. Starboard, port side. The watch was 4 hours on, 8 hours off. There was no room for mistakes. Main gate, you were busy checking identification of the personnel going through and the traffic going through. You were forever saluting. That wasn't for me. Dry dock was the loneliest post. That's where I felt at home. No one came there except the OD, the officer of the day, and the sergeant of the guard. So the officer of the day, the OD, was a Navy man. So he'd come up to you out of nowhere. And if he could remove your weapon from you, because I was a Marine, he would, if you gave him the chance. I got to know every inch of this ground, where all the cargo was, where all the places were to sit and rest and take a minute. I knew all the corners and the best spots from which to watch. There was one path where the OD, now hold on, page 152. There we go. There was one path where the OD could come through, and the lights in the distance from where I sat would show me a form coming through the path, like a shadow. So a few nights I challenged the form. Halt or I shoot. And since then, the Navy OD would come through with his flashlight shining so I didn't shoot him. Nobody liked the dry dock post because it was the loneliest post. I loved it. It kept me out of trouble. Hey, the truck needs to rest, Joe. Who's hungry? All right, there, that's that section.
Thank you, Annie. That was wonderful. You are such a consummate storyteller, whether you're sitting at the kitchen table, writing memoir, writing poetry through your podcast, from the stage. Your passion and power with storytelling is so evident. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your relationship to story, where you find stories, how you find them, and do you think of yourself as a story maker, creator, as a story hunter? Do you pursue stories, or do they chase you until you surrender? Tell us a little bit how you relate to stories and then how you make them yours.
Thanks, Edvige. That's a good question. So I found an artwork I made when I was about 6 years old, must have been first grade. And they said, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Draw a picture. So I drew 4 panes on the piece of paper. I have to, it's in the closet. I'm going to get it and I'll show you. And one pane was someone telling a story at the table. The second pane was someone telling the story on a corner. The third was on a stage, and the fourth was on like a pulpit at a church. And I guess even at that age, I was wondering, where am I going to speak from? And the best stories, of course, are always around the table in any culture, you know, the table or the floor, however you gather. Some cultures don't have tables. You just sit around, you know, you sit around the floor with pillows. But those are where the best stories are. And anyway, I started as a listener, as you could see, even in that, you know, those 2 sections. I mean, I basically, from a traumatized point of view, listened and memorized everything all the adults were saying as a way to survive it. And you couldn't get a word in edgewise anyway. I mean, the way I grew up, kids didn't have a voice. You really just had to, you know, shut up and listen. And that was our role as kids in the 60s in the Bronx, and in my world anyway.
Wow, thank you. Well, I know we could keep talking about stories, and I think, you know, one of the things that is really striking for me, knowing your work in so many different manifestations, is the level of intimacy that you establish with your stories, whether you are at the center of the stories or whether you are writing about family, or you are writing about the triangle fire. And I have something to ask you later about the triangle fire, something that both of us feel very passionate about. So in this piece that you just read, you're talking about family, your father, the uncle, and I know that they always have been interested in ancestral narrative. As a memoirist, you're not just interested in the kind of relentless exploration of the self, but you always look at the ways in which the story of the self is interconnected across time and space with other stories. So cross-generational narrative. Here I want you to talk to fellow writers who may be considering doing it but haven't done it, and especially to younger writers. So many of my students here, do it or don't do it. And what's the way to approach cross-generational narratives, especially when they may be riddled with secrets, with prohibitions to tell the story? What's the best way to approach it?
All right, well, I'm going to show you a necklace I made out of the pits of my grandmother's peach tree. And, you know, for me, this represents all the power of growth, because even if they came with nothing, and they did come with nothing, she had the ability to get a peach, any peach, eat it, spit the pit into the ground, and a tree grew with thousands of peaches. And then that tree had a tree, and that tree had a tree. I think the most important thing is to notice what's going on. I mean, just because a tree grows doesn't mean people are noticing it and figuring out where it came from, how it grew. And that attention is what always, you know, feels important to me, the attention. It's almost like I feel frozen in moments. Like when you read a haiku, right? It's a still life of a moment. And I feel the poet's consciousness is, in essence, a still life of thousands and thousands of moments, and that includes ancestry and all the mysteries. Now, you asked me about secrets. It's, you know, very tricky. I mean, because I faced dying as a teenager with cancer and several cancers, I was in a support group for teenagers with terminal illness, and I was the only one who survived. And my father taught me as a teenager, who was a frontline Marine in Okinawa, that really it's luck, the luck of the draw to survive. And it is the luck of the draw. It's a miracle to just be born. The odds are against us. The odds are against a sperm and an egg, you know, from the get-go. So it's luck. And luck plays a big thing in survival in my mind. So in a sense, I write as if I'm already dead. And you can only write free as if you're already dead, because if you write as if you're alive or you're going to stay alive, then I feel like death, because especially in Italian families and other ethnicities and races, there's secrecy and people don't want you to talk. In my family, it's a big shame to talk. In my heritage, as you know, it's not mine. I want to say our. Probably there's very few people out there listening that would say, oh no, we talk, we tell secrets. Pretty much secrets is, you know, the bedrock, I want to say, of a family. And so how do you tell a story? So, you know, as a kid, one of my places was underneath the table with the dog. You know, that's where I would sit when the adults were at the table. And I could breathe better down there because cigarette smoke rises, right? But I could also listen and hear all the stories. And I noticed from an extremely young age that the women told one story and the men told another story. And they really seemed to believe in different realities. And, you know, I could tell, like, you know, so as an example, and I'm going to leave out the details on purpose, but as an example, 4 men died in an explosion in Harlem. The women said it was an accident. The men said it wasn't an accident. The newspaper with the Irish cop said it was an accident. So now I'm a kid, 6 years old, listening to all this. And I'm hearing, it's like being in an ocean and there's a riptide. So one way's pulling you one way and another way's, you know, one way's pulling you out into the ocean and then another force is pulling you toward the land. And so I'm hearing this riptide of stories. And I think that riptide is where my consciousness lives, knowing you just circumnavigate the truth, but maybe you don't get there. Talking about ancestral stories. So, you know, my great-grandfather had a nickname. How I found some of my relatives in the south of Italy in the heel of the boot was because I knew my great-grandfather's nickname. His nickname was Mangiasard, which means eat sardines. How he got that nickname is lost to fact to me so far. But knowing the nickname was the key to finding the living relatives. And I think you got to close your eyes and give yourself permission to imagine. How do you get that nickname? How did those 4 men die? What happened? Why did the sister who lived through that lose her voice later in life? So as a kid, because the consciousness of a writer starts early, as a listener, there's the riptide.
Thank you so much, Annie. So many thoughts are through my mind as I listen to you. For one thing, I remembered the beautiful work you did at the Museum of Immigration on Ellis Island during Biamore's lifeline installation with the sheet and the grandmother's ocean. And you are so connected, so deeply connected with the fact that a story does not belong just to one person. There is no proprietary relationship to story, that the story is always collective patrimony. And this leads me to my next question, which is about this historical event that both of us are feel so passionate about. So I'm with my dear friend and colleague Marianne Trasciatti. We just completed this book called Talking to the Girls, Intimate and Political Essays on the Triangle Fire, which will be published next year. And to have Annie open this book with this spectacular essay called, a personal essay called Another Spring is such an honor. So my students from my Triangle Fire class are here today, and in the next couple of weeks, they are going to be focusing on developing a project where they're both researching some aspect of Triangle history, but also looking for the visceral connection with this event that happened 110 years ago and still has tremendous relevance to us. Could you tell us how you first learned about the Triangle Fire? And I think, you know, this whole notion of eavesdropping, of learning about history and stories accidentally is really relevant to the Triangle Fire. I also want to encourage our audience that this is the time for you to start posting your questions on chat. In a few minutes, we're going to open it up to Q&A. So how did you first learn about the Triangle Fire?
So Eddie, you gathered Italian-American intellectuals and artists and writers in many groups. And at one of those groups, the artist Phyllis Capello, the great poet and ukulele player and clown, and I say clown for a reason, which I'll tell you, she told me, hey, you got, you know, there's Triangle Fire, you have to chalk the names outside the buildings where they lived. She said, you know, I chalked, it was so moving. So it was really artist to artist, Phyllis Capello. And Phyllis and I, you know, we've had a few really interesting experiences. One day I was coming out of a nuclear medicine test at Sloan Kettering, where you're radioactive. So they fill your body with radioactive dye to take pictures. And who's there is Phyllis Capello in her full clown regalia with her ukulele, because she's a clown in the hospitals. They call it the clown care unit. So she serenaded me and my mother many times over many years at Sloan Kettering. And there's other stories too, but I know she's your next guest coming up in this series. So, and the other thing I'll say is I finally took on the language of my grandmother and mother and aunts, and I embroidered this square in the past couple of weeks. And this is Caterina Bona Giannatasio. She was 22 years old when she died in the Triangle Fire. And this is for a quilt that an artist, Pam Koehler, or Koehl, K-O-E-H-L, if anyone's interested in making a square, email me and I'll put you in touch. I'll put my email in the chat. And it's a beautiful quilt of just handmade dedications, you know, like the AIDS quilt on a smaller level. So, so my grandmother was a finisher in the factories, not at Triangle and not that day. But she was a finisher, an eagle eye, you know, not a thread was out of place ever. And, you know, you could imagine how she looked at me in the 70s, right? You know the story, Eddie, you know, pulling fringe and cutting my clothes with punk rock safety pins. And, you know, she looked at me like, you know, I was an alien, because literally there was not a thread out of place. You know, she was an eagle eye. So do you want me to read a little bit of work about the Triangle? So the thing about—
Yes, please.
So this is really an ancestral, let's say, visitation that's constant in my mind. So I was sitting in Syracuse in Sicily, and I was eating outside a couple of years ago, and there was a ladder that had flowers on it. Outside a restaurant. I thought it was beautiful. It was a ladder that just had like hanging planters of flowers. So right away, I see ladder, my mind goes to Triangle, because the workers needed a couple of things. They needed a key to the door to get the hell out of there, because the door was locked. They needed windows that opened outward instead of inward, so they didn't get trampled. They needed a fire escape that didn't collapse. And they needed a ladder that was tall enough to the floors where they worked on. So the ladders were 2 flights too short. So when I see a ladder, no matter where in the world I am, I think of these girls. And I say girls, there was boys there too. and men, but I think of the girls. I think of the 16-year-old immigrant girls. That's who I think about. So in Syracuse, I wrote this poem called A Ladder of Fiore, a ladder of flowers. And I dedicate it to Diane Fortuna, who's passed, and her great aunt Daisy, who jumped from the 9th floor and was one of, I think, 2 girls, I could be wrong, maybe 3, Sherry Kane could tell us, who survived for a couple of days in St. Vincent's Hospital. And when we lost St. Vincent's Hospital, I mean, that was a political nightmare and a loss. St. Vincent's Hospital, you know, treated triangle workers. You know, I mean, every devastation in New York for the past, how many years? 100 years, 150. So when we lose hospitals, when we lose, you know, sanctuaries, and then you see condos go up, it's an irreparable tearing of the fabric of society. It's an irreparable loss. Okay, a ladder of Fiore. I have built my mind for all the workers of the Triangle Fire, factory fire, those that escaped, those who ran, those who flew, those who sang 15 minutes before, those who whistled, those who tucked their wages into their socks, those who saved and saved and saved but were not saved, those who didn't come to work that day, those who worked just the day before, those who pushed others toward a way out, those who through walls jumped, heads wrapped in fabric, those who lifted cotton to cover each other's mouths. A simple white ladder, bone white rungs, enough flowers, enough water, enough rain to climb 10 stories. Climb 10 stories, flowers, climb 10 stories, water, climb 10 stories, rungs. Inconceivably high for those from hovels, barns, shtetls, paese. Climb 10 stories, roses, jasmine, lilacs, lavender, basil, sage, parsley, daisies, lilies. Climb 10 stories, purple and purple and purple and yellow and white and baby breaths. Climb the sharp corner of Washington and Green, for here, all who took their last jagged breath of sky.
Thank you so much, Annie. And I want to remind everyone that next week on March 25th is the 110th anniversary of the Triangle Fire. And here at NJCU, we will mark it with an event hosted by the NJCU Center for the Arts on how the Triangle Fire is remembered by a young generation. And thank you, Annie, for these powerful words and for the work that you do to honor the Triangle workers. So I'm looking at the time, and I think we're going to turn to questions from our audience. Donia, so do you have any questions from our audience for Annie?
I think a lot of our audience right now is just in awe, because every time Annie reads and performs, it's breathtaking. But we do have questions. So we have one from, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce anyone's names, I'm sorry in advance, from Alicia Wright. As you write and craft your stories, do you think about how they will be staged or presented, or does that come later on? I noticed that you have items at the ready to illustrate the scenes you are depicting.
Yeah, you know, I think riptide is my word for the day. So things come from all directions in all moments. I do, you know, I sketch in my notebook if a dream comes in an image. So once a dream came to me, I was bench pressing traffic lights. You see a traffic light behind me. And And I saw the traffic light also swinging like you might see at night in a windstorm, you know, dark night around it. And that eventually became something I did on stage. I figured out how to rig 2 traffic lights on a pole and I bench pressed it and then deadlifted it with some help from the audience. It was harder to deadlift it standing than bench press it. And it became a metaphor for me in a monologue about losing my housing in New York and about surviving the city and about the body in the city. And I think it's interesting just seeing the traffic light behind me because green's on the bottom, right? You can only see half the green in the shot, but you could see the full red and the full yellow. And life sometimes is like that. Like I want more green lights, don't you? That's what I think. We all need more green lights. So Alicia, however it comes, you know, have your mind open to catching it however it comes. And in terms of staging work, often a phrase, I'll take a phrase and then create it. So I might have had a phrase about, let's say, you know, peach pits. Like if I had a phrase about 50 peach pits, I might say, all right, there's a phrase, go make the 50 peach pits, go find them, you know, go pick them from under the tree. So I did that with triangle. I made a walking stick with 146 keys. And I'm sure that just came from a line in my poem, like the 146 needed a key. So then I went out and collected 146 keys and made the ritual object, you know. So take a phrase and embody it. Take a phrase and create it, I guess is the assignment I'm giving you.
Thank you for sharing, Annie. We have a question from Mike Fiorito. What would you say was the most difficult subject you've ever written about? Do you feel a release from writing about compromising subject matter?
Hi, Mike. I think, you know, I think class is hard to write about. And I think, so class, illness, the things that are hurdles in life, I find hard to, not hard to write about, but, you know, in America, we want success stories. We want narratives. We're used to narratives about how you not fell through the cracks, not how you're hanging on by a thread, but how you overcame your challenges in an Oprah way. You know, how you survived rape and became a billionaire television mogul. In reality, I'm hanging by a thread. I'm falling through the cracks of the healthcare system, how housing is set up. I lost my home in Brooklyn because of, you know, quote unquote, market rates. You know, an artist can't exist like that. An artist needs supportive community. Who has the supportive community? Priests have supportive community. You know what I mean? Artists are out there on our own. There's no career path. There's no, you know, I mean, I try to hold the maxim, just keep telling a better story. But, you know, it's not a meritocracy, so to speak. You also need a talent to get in front of the right people and all that. So I find survival, Mike, tricky to talk about. Not tricky in the writing, but tricky in, you know, because there's the transmission. Why do we, I could write anything, but now I'm transmitting. I'm talking to a group. There's artists in this group. There's very accomplished artists. There's students who are very brilliant, who come from hard Scrabble backgrounds. So what's the message? What's the transmission? Is it a message of hope and inspiration and keep fighting? Or is it, you know, what's the message? What's your position to reality, let's say? You know, money's hard to talk about, I think. What else?
Thank you, Annie. I actually have a question. I'm gonna pivot the conversation a little bit, and wait,
let me just say one other thing, Mike. Excuse me, Donia. If it weren't for the rich cross-class collaboration, those triangle workers would be forgotten martyrs. The labor movement probably would never have happened. And Sherry Kane in the audience can speak to this with expertise. But it was the cross-class collaboration of the Alma Vanderbilts, et cetera, what they called the Mink Brigade, that took on the plight of the destitute, poor, what I call the sacrificial class, the people whose lives are just not valued in society, the people whose backs all of us stand on. And how lucky, again, luck and riptide are my words for the day. I'm so lucky I got a vaccination. My cousins in the heel of the Buddha, Italy, are not getting vaccinations. In other countries, numbers aren't being counted. Who knows what's happening? So, where would Triangle be? Where would a lot of movements be were it not for, upper middle class interventions? Okay, I'll stop preaching. What are the other questions?
We have a question from Gabriella Belfigiello. Sorry again if I mispronounce your name.
Belfiglio.
Belfiglio. Thank you, Annie. So the question is, who would you love a chance to talk to, living or dead?
Nina Simone, Anna Magnani, and I'm done. That's it. Done. Finito. And Fellini. I'd love to. And I think my dream is to have dinner with Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft. I think that's my dream. And, that's it. I'd be done. Finito. And Edvige's father, I would have loved to talk to him, that's for sure. And my great-grandfather, how did he get the nickname Manjasad? I'd really like to know, And when I went to visit his grave, finally I coerced the gravedigger guy to tell me that he already washed the bones of my great-grandfather and they were elsewhere in this cave of bones. I don't know, maybe that's where I'll end up, in the cave of bones. Okay, what else? Riptide, luck, what else are we gonna talk about?
So I just had a question about sort of how you find it, because we have a lot of young writers in the audience today, and I'm sure they'd like to know, how do you go about sort of finding a home for these pieces you've written?
The first time I was really published was Edvige did an anthology in 2000 called The Milk of Almonds. And she asked, one of my poems won a prize from the Italian American Writers Association. So she approached me and said, let's publish that poem, and what else do you have? And I said to myself, and this is very heel of the boot mentality, but what's an anthology? Like, what does she want with my writing in this anthology? I don't even, and she couldn't get another piece out of me. She tried, can you imagine? She tried, and I'm sure, look, she's laughing. She'd say, yeah, I couldn't get another piece out of you. So well, you're all students of Edvige, so ask Edvige. And, there's a great resource at Poets and Writers where you could submit stuff. The Patterson Literary Review, submit. Maria Gillen edits this beautiful journal. And in Philadelphia, there's a journal called Philadelphia Poets, for everybody. That's just the name. Submit to them. The editor's Rosemary Capello. Maybe I could drop that in the chat, or if someone behind the scenes can. Patterson Literary Review, ask Edvige, Philadelphia Poets, and start your own journals and websites and magazines and podcasts. Put your own voice out there.
That is wonderful advice, Annie.
Thank you so much. We should have really asked for 2 hours with you, but we didn't. So we're gonna move towards closing the event, and we wanna get at least one poem out of you. I've learned my lesson. I'm not gonna ask you for more than one poem, since you make me work so hard for them. Donia, and thank you so much for helping out with the questions. So,
we got
Annie,
15 minutes on the meter. I don't know what your clock says. My meter, yeah. This is the goddess of time.
That's your meter. I got another meter. So give us a poem, Annie.
Another poem? All right.
Yes.
Okay, this one will be for you, because it's about Sicilia. In the muscular hills of Sonoma County, I looked for Sicilia. in Bronx alleyways under tin lids of dented trash cans that had been kicked in their sides. I looked. In tart green shadows of Uncle Frank's grapevine in Spring Valley, under the blankets over the rising focaccia in Aunt Lucy's basement Friday nights. She said she called it the corpse. In Grandpop Carmine's driveway in Morris Park, in the teal iron chairs on Grandma Anna's porch on Van Buren Street, that bobbed with our weight behind off-white lace curtains of Grandma Rose's windowsill, in clay pots of her fire escape tomatoes, in the echoes of Spalding ricochets, in the canyon courtyard of brick apartment buildings, in Gaetano's pigeon coops in Throg's Neck, across from St. Raymond's Cemetery. I looked for Cecilia in Grandpop Giuseppe's hands, scooping a scopa on the card table on the sidewalk outside the shoemaker on White Plains Road. I looked for Cecilia in the Hunts Point Terminal Market when the sun rose pink through chain link fence. I looked in the slant of light in my mother's kitchen window that rose in the well of flour, dusting the sun, spilled on her countertop as she pulled dough into a well, 2 fingers at a time, egg yolk, volcano, the last fringe of light she and Grandma sewed. I looked for Cecilia under the L in broken light patches on Jerome Avenue. On the asphalt, I looked for Cecilia in oil slick rainbows on St. Raymond's Avenue in Zariga, in the brown lace-up shoe my sister found, another century inside her bathroom wall. I looked when they remodeled the house. I looked for Cecilia almost everywhere, but I never knew it was Cecilia I was looking for until I drove up the mountain to San Gregorio, where the cliff curve never heard of guardrails, a nameless road where your whole life could be gone if you falter or blink. Thank you.
Wow. Well, I want to personally thank you for that poem. As someone who was born in Sicily and writes obsessively about the island I left, your poem speaks so much to me. But I think, you know, you look for Sicily, we're all looking for some place that speaks to us like no other place. And I think next year we're going to have to do a Looking for Sicilia conversation. So I will speak to Stephanie about that. Annie, thank you so much for sharing your words, your ideas, for your generosity. It's such a gift to all of us. And I know we're going to be doing more and more other projects together. We were so lucky to have you as a writer in residence here at New Jersey City University. And I remember every time I would pass by your office, there were students everywhere, you know, on the window, on the desk, chairs, bookshelves. That little office was packed with students, and of course we know why. Thank you so much for being with us today. Want to remind also, again, in addition to the Triangle Fire events we are hosting, that remember the Triangle Fire Coalition is hosting the official commemoration, and as a university, we're very honored that 2 of our students will be representing 2 of the 146 workers. So please go on the website of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition, and you can register for this very, very important event. And there are ways of participating by uploading a selfie or yourself holding a poster board with the hashtag Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. If you have any questions about anything related to the Triangle Fire, or you want to suggest events, you can get in touch with me. Donia, would you mind writing my email on chat? Thank you so much. Before so I don't have to glue my face to the monitor. Stephanie and the whole team and the NJCU Center for the Arts, thank you so much for your wonderful work, for making this possible, and thank you to our audience for spending this hour with us.
Eddie, thank you so much. Donia, Annie, you know, the words that I just jotted down from your amazing poem, those who saved and saved but were not saved. My wish today from you, Annie, is that you have inspired us and that we save each other with our voices, and you have inspired us to tell our truth. So beautiful. You have an event coming up tomorrow night from 7 to 9, the Glimpse Speaker Series. Do you want to say where we can join that? Because we have a flyer here. But
I just dropped it in the chat. Okay. And you could, so copy the, why don't you screenshot the chat or look up Glimpse Speaker Series or email me. My email's in the chat. Thanks to NJCU, really, you're the best. I wish I went to NJCU as a college kid. I wish Edvige was my mentor when I was 18. And really, thanks for all the gatherings that you bring, you know, that you weave us all our souls together, always. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I love NJCU students. You're the best, really, the best. Call me anytime. Eddie will give you my number. She does give my number out, so call me anytime. And Phyllis, thanks for coming. We talked about you. I quoted you. I told intimate stories about you, so I'm glad you came a little late. You didn't hear all that. And we'll all be here coming up.
Awesome. Well, Anna Carhart, Justin Tinker, Sabrina Saballo, you are amazing. You make this just rock, so thank you. And we have some upcoming events to tell you about. Thursday, March 25th is How the Triangle Fire is Remembered by a New Generation 110 Years Later. You can sign up for all of these events at njcu.edu/arts. And Phyllis Capello on Tuesday, March 30th. You can sign up for that, njcu.edu/arts. And we're very much looking forward to hearing from you, Phyllis. We have artist Jazz Graff, The Art and Impossibilities of Belonging, Wednesday, March 31st at 3 o'clock. And then we have a concert coming up, the Honey Dewdrops, Saturday, April 17th at 8 o'clock. So you can find all this information out again, njcu.edu/arts, and all of these are free admission. So I'm going to hand this back to you, Eddie, to close out.
Well, thank you again, everyone. Have a great day and good luck finding your stories or having the stories find you. Annie, thanks again. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Ciao, ciao.